afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Melbourne Speakers Forum. It's an open mic platform where anyone can talk politics, religion, philosophy, social issues, anything that's on your mind or anything that you feel passionate or about or feel it's important. Today we've got a guest from Western Australia. This is John. I'll pass it on to John.
Thanks a lot. My name's John Massam from Western Australia. I come over here every 6 months for a economics reform type of meeting, which is sort of the executive for the whole of Australia. But I'd like to talk today, if I may. Someone suggested that I should talk about banking. Quite interesting because this last couple of days I've read some bits and pieces about banking, so forgive me if I haven't got it quite clear. But the one I clearly remember, of course, is remember the president, not Theodore Roosevelt? Well, in his book, which is called The History of America or something by Theodore Roosevelt, he gives, at various pages, he gives the banking system in Wall Street a serve. By that I mean he criticises them, says they're causing a lot of economic trouble. And we do have a problem with banking. In this last 5 or 10 years, if you're careful on the internet and look, you will find huge banking corporations and Wall Street firms being fined millions and millions of dollars for deceiving the public, for cheating, for lying, for getting money, often they don't let the thing finish in court. They're sued in the court by some government department, that's overseeing them, and they then put up an offer that they'll pay so many million or billion in order to save expensive weeks and months of court cases. And we have another case here in Australia as well. I think it's a well-known bank, which is called Macquarie. Is that right, folks? Yes. And one of the biggest offenders is J.P. Morgan, also called Morgan this and Morgan that. J.P. upon Morgan, way back in American history, that is in the 1800s, he was a real rogue and he made billions and millions. Now, his successor companies are doing all sorts of dirty tricks, so it seems, and they are facing the music. But this is what the point I'm trying to get across. Even the very day after they were exposed in the news media as having to pay this huge sum into court, they were still being quoted in at the end of the news. They sometimes have an economic summary. You have the Commonwealth Bank, and you have this Macquarie, and you have this. And Morgan Company was also, the representative was up there speaking. How can you accept that this is reasonable? Under the same truth. The truth is that fractional reserve banking, the word fraction gives you the key. They know that if a bank can hold about 10% of the amount in cash in their vaults, they can lend 9 or 10 times that out as checkbook money, or in these days it's like credit card money. So these people who've discovered that are telling us a good truth, and the fractional reserve system is definitely adding, what it does, it adds costs to everything, because whenever a young businessman or a young woman setting up a hairdressing salon, if she needs to borrow money for the equipment, if she borrows that from the bank, of course, will want interest. But the reality is the bank, it didn't cost them anything to just tell her, right, you've got a $10,000 loan, so she goes out, buys this, buys that, and hires some staff and starts paying them. And when you start a business like that, for the first few weeks or months, you're paying people really just to stand around, have cups of coffee, because the clients aren't coming in very much. As your business builds up, of course, different. So the reality is they're charging interest on something that they didn't really lend you. But the fractional reserve question that you just raised, for prudence, banks are very sensible not to just go on wildly lending in all directions until if there's a run on the bank, then they're finished. In past centuries, when there's been runs on the bank, sensible governments have taken some action to stop the banks going bankrupt. And there's a lot of sense in that. Some of them has been as simple, I think in Australia somewhere, a certain bank was said to be insolvent, people were queuing up down the streets back in colonial times, or perhaps just the last century. And so the bank, the government treasury of the state concerned, people saw that heavy boxes being brought out by strong workmen, loaded on a cart or a truck or whatever the vehicle was of the day. These heavy boxes were driven along to the bank and they were taken into the bank vault, and the queue started to get less and less. Oh, the government treasuries put them lots of money there. They thought, they weren't really told this. The reality was, of course, it was just a fake.
Just lead. A stunt, was it? Just to make
it was just lead, not gold. But the main thing was, when the queues dropped down, all the people who draw their money out of the bank say the bank's going to fail. After a week or two or a month or two, they realise, what am I going to do with this money? Under the mattress? So they finally all drift back, if not to that bank, to other banks. So it's the banking system as a whole. It just needs enough notes and coins to keep it so that if somebody walks in and says, I want 300, I want 1,000, they can just dish out 1,000 and off you go. Not realising it's all really fairy tale money, and the government money, of course, is just fairy tale money too. So some reformers actually want the amount of money produced, issued every week or month or year or whatever, to be equated with the amount of goods and services that are produced. When I originally was told this, I thought that was reasonably simple. The older I get, I realise how hard that is. I was up at
to be able to measure weekly how much is being produced, sort of thing.
Well,
yeah.
How much of what's being produced is actually trash that nobody wants? I was up at the Victoria markets this morning, and there were rows and rows of funny objects in store after store, things that nobody in their right mind would buy, but somebody was going to buy them. Toys galore, all sorts of things, plus ordinary things like fruit and vegetables and meat and meals and drinks and things. But a lot of it was just junk. And of course, yes, the question.
Sorry, John, I'm just talking involved, but I'm just thinking, I agree, a lot of what is produced is crap, and we feel bound to buy it. Sorry, not all of us, but some people buy it, because they're just not thinking, right? But the trouble is that if no one bought it, people will be out of a job. It simply so easy to produce what is required. So to keep people employed, we need to produce what is not required, what is often neither useful nor relevant, and then employ people to advertise to convince people to buy it.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. One of the main points of the question was that it's so easy to produce things these days. Now that is the great improvement since the start of the Industrial Revolution, the coal mines and then later the oil wells. The whole society is so much more can be produced with less and less human labour.
Yeah.
And that, of course, brings us to the other question. As you're displacing human labour, right, the unions can fight to have the hours brought down from 60 a week to 40 a week and then to 38 a week. But even that isn't enough. There aren't enough jobs really because we've got a modern society. So if you had a sensible economic system based on something like what the Citizens Electoral Council and other reformers are trying to get, there would be less and less work needed. However, I differ from one of the reform groups who thinks we should have a leisure state, and I believe that leisure states are no good. You can see what happens to a lot of people in leisure. Just go down to the Crown Casino here or Perth. They get the money and they're wasting it.
Or even worse.
What about a four-day standard work week? So we have 3 days off instead of 2, and then that would actually because people have more time, they'd have more time to do entertainment. You hope they wouldn't go gambling, but say they wanted to go, hang on a sec, say they wanted to go snow skiing or water skiing, they'd spend money in those things. So there'd be actually an increase in the entertainment and service industry sector, plus people would have more time, plus the jobs where they actually need 5 or 7 days of work a week, they can have 2 people, you know, one do 4 days, one do 3 days, something like that. So you'd have actually more jobs spread across the economy, people would have more free time, and because they artificially, or I say falsely measure standard of living based on GDP, it's not really taking into account leisure time. If you had 3 days off but the same amount of money, or even 10% less money, but had an extra day, that'd change your whole life. You know, you could spend 2 days doing your family things, 1 day pursuing a hobby or a private business, and the other 4 days at work, instead of 5 days, you know?
There's a lot of goodness in that question, isn't there? The idea that I had and your idea would help it to just give a lot of people what the social creditors used to call a social dividend, and some of them try and live on it. Lack of work is bad for humanity. I think we're meant to do some work.
Yeah.
It's better for our bodies, it's better for our brains, and of course it keeps us out of some of the worst trouble. Devil makes work for idle hands, old saying, but it may be not true, but I think it is. And so that idea of yours is excellent. A 3-day weekend, why not? And more people coming into work instead of huge percentages of our young people not getting jobs. Now that's very harmful.
That's right.
The future.
Yeah, that's
the young
right.
people who don't get into jobs, you've got to get into the pattern of getting up, getting dressed, going to work, or else you're going to end up being a lay around or wanting to just smoke dope, or steam is very important. And I thought someone, was it you, that wrote a question talked about war, did you? Because one of the problems, if the economy is out of balance like it is, it leads to countries wanting to export more than we import, or export more and more. Then that leads to wars. It certainly has led to wars in the past. I'm not sure if it would lead to wars now, but I know what the sort of nonsense that's going on. The trade agreements that companies are signing.
Yeah.
The one with China is the most dangerous one. It's called the Free Trade Agreement. Now, people with long memories will remember 10 or 20 or whatever years ago, Australia signed the Australia-US Free Trade Agreement. The propaganda, what the benefits would be to Australia, there was a lot of propaganda. But you know, we still have 3.5% inflation, 6 or 12% unemployment. Oh, you know to always double what the government says is the unemployment figure, don't you? Because there's another figure that the Bureau of Stats has, but the government never quotes that one. So it's the export fight for markets and fights for exports can boil over into fights with guns and ships and planes, which of course is harmful.
John, quick question. The global financial crisis not long ago, America's response was to just print money. What's your opinion about that? Just printing money to...
This is the question. The global financial crisis, the American response was to print money. The Australian response was to, under the Labor government, was to come up with all sorts of public works. One was the sealing vats. There was another one I've forgotten. In other words, to prime the economy with work and paying wages and things. Of course, the money for that, I'm not sure where that came from. Getting back to the questioner though, American printing money, it's all fictitious and a fake. Unless you can get away from this debt system, this interest system, and the system of allowing people who happen to own some land near where a railway is going to go in a railway station, they get all this huge unearned money. They become wealthy people for doing nothing, just happening to be in the right place at the right time. So all those things should be fixed up in society, and I'm quite sure that what the Americans have done is wrong, and whether it will lead to another horrible crisis that's worse than the global financial crisis, I'm not sure.
So there's sort of rules for the superpowers, there's rules for the middle economies, and then there's sort of rules for the developing and the impoverished countries, you know? And there's always just an economic excuse as to why certain policies that may actually be harmful to most of the citizens of a country, there's sort of always some justification for it, you know?
That's right. That's a perfect explanation of it. I hope that's on the sound record, because that's explained it better than I could, really. And it must be nearly time for me to come to a conclusion. And so, on this day, the 23rd of November 2014, could I hand the microphone back to our esteemed Chairman, Vitt.